In that hour of trial, it was the love of his master that helped most to hold him firm. But also deep down in him lived still unconquered his plain hobbit sense. He knew in the core of his heart that he was not large enough to bear such a burden, even if such visions were not a mere cheat to betray him. The one small garden of a free gardener was all his need and due, not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. This week we are reading Book 6, Chapter 1 of The Return of the King, The Tower of Cirith Ungol. My name is Logan.
And my name is Zach.
Welcome to Mordor, Zach.
Welcome to Mordor indeed. This is such a complex chapter. I mean, it's really simple, right? It's like, if I was to give a one-sentence summary, it's Sam wakes up, finds Frodo. They leave the Tower of Cirith Ungol.
Yes.
That's basically all that happens in this chapter. But at the end of the day, it's really a chapter about Sam. It's about his courage and his resolve to save Frodo, but also his unquenchable hope.
Yeah.
This chapter also has just one of my absolute favorite moments in the entire book. Sam, he's completely lost. He's trying to find Frodo. He comes to this dead end. He's surrounded by like dozens of dead orc corpses. And then he just starts to sing this song. I'm just going to read it because I think it's so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
Though here at journey's end I lie, in darkness buried deep, beyond all towers strong and high, beyond all mountains steep, above all shadows rides the sun, and stars forever dwell. I will not say the day is done, nor bid the stars farewell.
Yeah.
Can you imagine a worse place to be? I mean, he's like at the edge of Mordor. He doesn't know Frodo's alive. He's surrounded by dead, stinking orc corpses.
Right.
And he's like, I'm not going to give up because I know that there is something greater than me in the world that evil can't touch. And even Sauron, in all of his power, can't change the fact that tomorrow the sun is going to rise.
I love that he starts to sing and it's sort of like self-soothing. Like he's just singing little snatches of things that he remembers, childhood tunes. And
yeah, doesn't it say like it's things that Bilbo wrote?
Yeah, he starts with like rhymes that Bilbo wrote, and then it just sort of spills out of him his own words that I think he sets to like a childhood tune or something like that.
Oh yeah, you're so right. It says, and then suddenly new strength rose in him and his voice rang out, while words of his own came unbidden to fit the simple tune.
Yeah, it's like this inspired thing, but he inspires hope in himself by singing it, which is really, beautiful, I think. And it's also the best thing that the best song that Sam sings in the book, because most of his songs are like donor boner songs. and this one's really beautiful, and he just doesn't really have a real way with words. But
I think his song about Gandalf was really good.
Yeah, that's true. He's saying it's true. I wasn't being fair to Sam, but when I read this, in preparation for the episode, I just immediately thought of Donor Boner and was like, wow, Sam's come a long way.
I caught myself wondering, it's so good. I caught myself wondering if it was actually like a grace of the Valar.
That's how I felt too. Yeah.
In the same way that he sort of knows to say like Elbereth Gothoniel, or Frodo says like Arendelle Elenion and Kalima, like they have this like elvish like stuff just kind of come out of them, because very shortly he's going to see this played out in real life when he's laying down the fields of Mordor.
Yeah.
He's going to see Venus in the sky, and he's going to be struck by how beautiful it is, and he's going to realize that the reeks of Mordor may obscure the light of the stars, but they'll never extinguish them. And so I think that this is almost, it's a foreshadowing, but I think it's also potentially something that's being given to him by powers that are beyond his capabilities.
But I love that it is met by, I mean, he starts to sing himself first. And then something about that impulse gets met by, like, that's a prayer. You know, even though it's these like silly songs from his childhood, it gets met by this like inspiration that rises up in him. And it does end up being the thing, you know, then he hears something that he thinks might have been Frodo.
Yeah, yeah. He hears Frodo like singing in response.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think that's the best moment of this chapter.
The other thing that happens is this. We've talked about this several times, all the way back in like the Shadows of the Past chapter, how Bilbo is the only person in history who ever willingly gave up the ring. Now we got a second one, baby.
Yeah.
Sam, if not reluctantly, willingly gives the ring back to Frodo.
And it even says that his reluctance has more to do with his putting the burden on Frodo more than it is about his, you know, will to power or whatever, which is pretty different than Bilbo even, right? Like, and he hasn't had it that long. So, but there's a purity of heart in Sam, and it, you know, it mentions that about his, like we read at the beginning, about his kind of hobbit,
Plain hobbit sense.
Yeah. And there's no one plainer than Sam. He's the plainest, but he's also the most heroic because of that, I think.
You know, we get Sam's, what Dr. Corey Olson calls a ring-induced monologue, where we sort of see his delusions play out of him like being a general who's like calling men to his command, and he's marching on Barad-dûr. But then he snaps himself out of it so fast. He's just like, all right, you know,
I don't
like,
need that.
I would get absolutely destroyed by this guy immediately if I tried to claim the ring as my own. And like, you know, like, snap out of it, Samwise. Like, all you need is enough land for your own garden. You know, not something swollen to the size of a. He imagines himself as a master gardener, which is just such a.
I know, it's so funny.
It's such a beautiful, like, even in the midst of this like evil thing that's giving him these like delusions of grandeur, like, at his heart, what he is a gardener.
Yeah.
He's someone who wants to make the world grow,
right?
And he wants to bring life into the world and take care of other people. And he's so caring of Frodo in this chapter. You know, like his tone of voice, like his internal monologue to himself, is so self-deprecating in this chapter. It's like, well, you've probably made the wrong choice, and you know, he's cursing himself constantly. But once he starts talking to Frodo, he has this like maternal.
Absolutely. That's the way to describe it, I think.
Voice. I mean, it talks about how he like cradles Frodo in his arms like a child waking up from a bad dream, and he caresses him and he calms him down. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. But, you know, we never get Frodo's ring-induced monologue ever in the book.
That's interesting.
We have like him having like really sharp changes in mood where he will snap at Sam, like he calls him a thief in this chapter.
Yeah.
But we never get, like, what is Frodo being tempted with, I wonder?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, it's hard to imagine Sam as like a general, but we do kind of, you know, in the last couple chapters,
like a warrior.
Exactly. In the last couple chapters with Sam, we get this sort of like elf warrior thing happening, you know? And so you're like, well, maybe, you know, you kind of could see him as a general.
Yeah.
But we never get anything like that with Frodo. Frodo is such a, you know, we then lose the interiority of Frodo after Fellowship.
Yeah, we really kind of, I think you're right. Do you think it's Fellowship that we start to lose his interiority?
Yeah, I mean, after he gets stabbed by the Morgul blade.
Yeah, his cheerfulness
goes away, and we don't really get to hear about what he thinks about things as much.
I can sort of speculate that as he like reaches this like kind of like high and noble saintly mode, that you can imagine his ring-induced monologue being like imagining himself as a saintly figure, or like being a benevolent ruler, master of the ring, but benevolent and kind. And we don't get his monologue, but we do get his threats.
Mm-hmm.
Several times he threatens Gollum with using the ring to tell him to kill himself, either by choking on fish or by jumping into the fire. In this chapter, we see him call Sam a thief, which, can you imagine like a more like bitter.
It's a terrible thing to say to Sam. Yeah.
It says that Sam wipes tears away from his eyes. And of course, it would make Sam cry. I mean, Sam has just risked his life to bring this thing to save Frodo's life, and he calls him a thief. So he's clearly going through very similar temptations.
I think it's really insightful. I mean, this idea that he would see himself as a saint, as like a, spotless character. I think, and I think that, as I think about Frodo carrying the ring, he carries it like a cross. And it's this like long suffering thing with really small amounts of complaining. And so I think that idea that he would see himself, as somehow elevated above everyone around him, not as some kind of conquering hero, but as like a beatific,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
vision or something, almost on the level of like an angel, like Gandalf, and then to juxtapose that with the kind of horrible things he says to Smeagol and the way that he treats, Sam in this chapter is really, that's just stark,
So yeah, a very simple chapter with a lot of complex action happening. So hopefully we don't get too much in the weeds of like kind of breaking down every movement here, because I think we could spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, I think we want to kind of touch on the greatest hits from this chapter and move through it in that way.
Yeah. So Sam wakes up after he's absolutely knocked himself out cold against the gate of these orcs.
It's like a side gate or something.
Yeah, it says he was in the deep dark outside the undergate of the orc stronghold. Its brazen doors were shut. And this part was a little confusing to me because he's there, but then he runs back to Shelob's lair at one point.
Well, I think that this undergate area goes into Shelob's tunnels. Like that's how you get in, because he has to go over a wall inside Shelob's tunnels in order to get to the undergate area, and then as he leaves, he goes over that wall again.
Yeah, he makes his way back towards the orc tower that we call Cirith Ungol. What I wanted to point out is this kind of zoom out in time after Sam wakes himself up. He wonders what time it is. And he says somewhere between one day and the next, he supposed.
They always wondered what time it is. There it is again.
They always want to know what time it is. It's like the most Hobbit thing. They like, wake up, what's the time?
So funny.
It says he was in a land of darkness where the days of the world seemed forgotten and where all who entered were forgotten too. And then he wonders if his friends are thinking about him. And it says, out westward in the world, it was drawing to noon upon the 14th day of March in the Shire reckoning. And even now, Aragorn was leading the Black Fleet from the Peligir, and Merry was riding with Rohirrim down the Stonewain Valley, while in Minas Tirith, flames were rising, and Pippin watched the madness growing in the eyes of Denethor. And then it says, yet amid all their cares and fear, the thoughts of their friends turned constantly to Frodo and Sam. They were not forgotten, but they were far beyond aid, and no thought could yet bring any help to Samwise Hamfast's son. He was utterly alone.
I think it's really beautiful that Tolkien lets us know that Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli and Pippin and Sam and Gandalf are always thinking about Frodo and Sam. Just as we are as readers in a way. I don't know about you, but throughout the entire last book, you're always kind of thinking like, what's going on with Frodo and Sam right now?
Yeah, you just kind of forget, and then it like comes back to you all at once. Yeah. He has this moment of hesitation before he enters into Mordor.
Yeah. he gets to basically the crown of the pass, right? So like one side goes out of Mordor and the other side goes into Mordor. And he stops and sits down and he can't get himself to go any further. And he takes out the ring at that moment and puts it on. And he feels the burden of it again, but it's even worse now that it's like staring into the face of Mordor, right?
Yeah, it says, but now more strong and urgent than ever, the malice of the eye of Mordor searching, trying to pierce the shadows that it had made for its own defense, but which now hindered it in its unquiet and doubt.
Yeah, I love that line.
It's like the darkness that Sauron has made is actually preventing him from seeing the thing that he wants the most.
Yeah. And then, and it's also, I mean, I think tied to that is this, you know, the power of the ring to make him invisible is useful in this moment. But as he gets closer to his goal of trying to find Frodo, being invisible is less and less useful to Sam because he's in a fog. He can't really see what's going on because it makes, you know, reality less real and makes yourself more real. We talked about that, I don't know, a dozen episodes ago. But he says it's no good blundering about in the fog, and he takes it off.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that he takes it off that kind of allows him to walk through the, you know, walk through this tower, because he comes across as this like terrifying elf warrior to these orcs, you know. But if he had the thing on, maybe he wouldn't be able to find what he needs to find, and maybe the, you know, the orc that sees him wouldn't have run away and kind of led him toward the tower. And so, you know, it's Sam's, something about, again, like Sam's good hobbit sense. He's like, I gotta get this ring off. I need to be able to see.
He says that moved it may be by some premonition of danger, though to himself he thought only that he wished to see more clearly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean,
Fascinating.
I think that's the grace of the powers. You know, that's Gandalf praying for Sam.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely.
The Valar, you know, all the way in Valinor, just gently giving him insights and clues as to what to do, and then him acting on those, you know, trusting his gut. You know, as he has this, like, before he takes the ring off, he has this like kind of sharpened sense, and he listens and he hears that there's fighting going on in the tower. It says the orcs must be at war among themselves. Shagrat and Gorbag had come to blows. And then he just screams, "I'm coming, Mr. Frodo."
Yeah.
And that's when he crosses fully into this land, and you have this classic Tolkien short sentence: Sam had crossed into Mordor.
This is where he sees Mount Doom, or Odruin, the Mountain of Fire. And we get these descriptions of Mordor. It's like, you know, we haven't really gotten hardly any real descriptions of Mordor.
Mm-mm.
But the paragraph is kind of harrowing. You know,
Yeah.
it's all about molten rock and magma and ash, and, you know, the way that these things cool. It says the great channels of molten rock would wind their way down into the stony plain until they cooled and lay like twisted dragon shapes vomited from the tormented earth. There's a Tolkien sentence for you. And it says it's a labor for Sam to behold Mount Doom. And he just stands aghast. And, you know, he knows it needs to find Mr. Frodo and then walk into that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a pretty terrible. It's just, you know, it underlines everything terrible about the task that these guys have been.
The accursed land.
Yeah.
He sees the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and he has this revelation.
Yeah, this is so good.
It says, as he gazed at it, suddenly Sam understood, almost with a shock, that this stronghold had been built not to keep enemies out of Mordor, but to keep them in. He realizes that, you know, this has been made by the men of Gondor as like a defense against the orcs after Sauron's fall
Yes.
to keep them hemmed into Mordor. But then after Sauron returns, it says, since his return to Mordor, Sauron had found it useful, for he had few servants but many slaves of fear, and still its chief purpose, as of old, was to prevent escape from Mordor. So it's like the Gondorians used this tower to keep the orcs in to save Gondor, and Sauron uses it to keep his slaves from fleeing.
And, Sauron, for all his industry, never really builds anything like lasting that is worthwhile. He uses these old cities and towers of Gondor. He just repurposes things, that were once beautiful into ugliness, which is the same thing. So, we were told that about the orcs here too.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, that he cannot make, he can only mock. I think that maybe the one exception would be the fortress of Barad-dûr.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is wrapped up in his very being. When he dies, it will be destroyed. Well, not dies. When he's defeated,
just crumbles.
It just crumbles. Yeah. So, even that is like, it's not long lasting. These towers built by the men of Gondor, like the Argonath and Minas Tirith, they live long past the people who made them. Barad-dûr can't survive without Sauron. I think that's a really astute point. As he moves into Mordor, the burden of the ring grows stronger, and that's where we start to get Sam's temptation, but also the sense of like heaviness. And Sam begins to, I think at this point, like realize just how burdened Frodo has been. It says, as it drew near the great furnaces where in the deeps of time it had been shaped and forged, the ring's power grew. It became more fell, untamable, save by some mighty will. Even though Sam isn't wearing the ring now.
Yeah, fascinating.
He begins to feel himself enlarged, as if he were robed in a huge distorted shadow of himself. A vast and ominous threat halted upon the walls of Mordor. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. The idea of being enlarged, but not enlarged in yourself, but enlarged by something like
a shadow self
added to yourself. Your shadow self is being added,
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like your id being enlarged or something. It's uncontrollable. And it's sort of like reflected by this threat that, that Mordor has for everyone. But certainly for Sam and Frodo in this moment. And yeah, then he slips into these wild fantasies in his mind. Samwise the strong, hero of the age, striding with a flaming sword across a darkened land, and armies flocking to his call as he marched to the overthrow of Barad-dûr.
He had only to put on the ring and claim it for his own, and all this could be.
And it's at his command, right? It's back to that kind of word of command that just at a word he could cause gardens of flowers and trees to come forth.
And then his like good hobbit sense, plain hobbit sense, brings him back down to earth, and he says that all he needed was one small garden for a free gardener, not a garden swollen to a realm, his own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. He essentially goes like, all those like ridiculous fantasies, I don't need that. I just need what I already have in Hobbiton. I need a garden that I can tend, and that's beautiful and that's good. And then he says, and anyway, all these notions are only a trick. He'd spot me and cow me before I could so much as shout out. He'd spot me pretty quick if I put the ring on now in Mordor. Well, all I can say is this. Things look as hopeless as a frost in spring. Just when being invisible would be really useful, I can't use the ring.
That's amazing, right? That he just decides, I'm not going to put it on. What a guy. I don't know. I just love this dude so much.
He's great.
he makes his way toward the tower. He sees that this thing is sort of like built back into the like up onto the mountain or something.
Yeah, it's like an incredible structure, kind of similar to Minas Tirith.
Yeah, it goes backwards and up, and he comes to the gate, but then he kind of runs into like a force field or something invisible.
So he comes to this like arch under a pass, and at the entrance are these two horrific seated carven figures. Each had three joined bodies and heads facing outward and inward and across the gateway. The heads had vulture faces, and on their great knees were laid claw-like hands. They seemed to be carved out of huge blocks of stone, immovable, and yet they were aware. Some dreadful spirit of evil vigilance abode in them. They knew an enemy, visible or invisible, none could pass unheeded. They would forbid his entry or his escape. And so he sees these things. He's like stunned to stillness. And it's like he is being caught in like one of Shelob's webs, but there's like an invisible line that he can't cross.
Well, are these the same watchers as are at the bridge?
Oh my God, Logan. Okay. I got so confused with this. Okay. So these are called the Two Watchers with a capital T and a capital W.
Yeah.
And if you go back to the Black Gate is closed, Gollum is trying to convince the hobbits not to try and go in through the Black Gate. And he says instead that they should try the secret way, like kind of behind Minas Morgul. And Sam is like, well, I mean, it's not like this thing's going to be unguarded. And Gollum says, no, there's orcs there and shadowy things and things worse than orcs. Says the road climbs right under the shadow of the walls and passes at the gate. Nothing moves on the road that they don't know about. The things inside know, the silent watchers.
The silent watchers. Okay.
Then a little bit later on that same page in my edition, it says, that is the only way the big armies can come. But away down west, he is not afraid, and there are the silent watchers. So there are the silent watchers with a capital S and a capital W that are sort of patrolling the road up to Shelob's lair and into Mordor. So I had a moment of panic where I'm like, oh, wait. I was talking about there being silent watchers like on the bridge into...
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah.
And so I went a little bit further, and there's a moment where before they get onto the winding stair, Frodo like sort of like starts like zombie walking towards Minas Morgul. He's like being pulled there,
So
and there are
weird.
these like shapes, like bestial carvings and all these things. And so I was like, oh no, I misread. These are the silent watchers that Gollum was talking about. But I looked again, page 738 in my edition. We get the kind of dialogue between, Shagrat and Gorbag. And Gorbag, who is from Minas Morgul, says, see here, our silent watchers, capital S, capital W, were uneasy more than 2 days ago. That I know. But my patrol wasn't ordered out for another day, nor any message sent to Lugberts either. That's, Barad-dûr. So it seems like the silent watchers were in Minas Morgul, and the two watchers are at the entrance to Cirith Ungol.
So are they all these kind of enchanted statues?
I do not know. I think so. I think they are two separate things.
They're two separate things in two different places, but they're the same technology, for the want of a better word.
Sure.
That is sort of set to as like a, I don't know what, magical alarm system or something.
Yeah, I mean, when he crosses the path of these two watchers, where we get like great detail about how they're, how they're carved and what they look like and their joined bodies and their grotesque features and all that. He, of course, holds up the light of Galadriel, of Galadriel, and he passes through, but still it says there came a high shrill cry that echoed in the towering walls before him. And he says essentially like, I've rung the doorbell.
And doesn't a bell ring?
He says, "Now I've rung the doorbell," and then
Oh,
later on, when they pass back out, like going into Mordor, it says a bell clangs again. So like every time they pass these things, it recognizes them as an enemy and it rings an alarm. But it seems like the bestial shapes that sort of try and pull Frodo into Minas Morgul also had some sort of alarm that the orcs from Minas Morgul say was raised, that they knew that
yeah.
there were enemies on the road on the stair. So yeah, this is really confusing.
It is confusing.
I don't think it's clear cut, but I think that there's the silent watchers and then there's the two watchers. I think they serve really similar like alarm functions.
I think so too. But Sam gets past him thanks to the grace of Galadriel, and now he's like in it. The first thing he sees is two orcs, each with a knife in their back, wearing two different liveries, and the stones are just slick with blood, which is kind of the whole condition of this fortress. It's just full of dead orcs.
It's interesting that in the Two Towers we get this sort of like inner orc rivalry between the orcs from Isengard and the orcs from Mordor. And that makes sense to me because they're really really far away. Here it's like the lower part of the valley and the upper part of the valley.
Yeah, they just hate each other.
It's bizarre. One's from like the town of Minas Morgul and one's from the town of Cirith Ungol. And yeah, they're not that far apart. It's just strange that it's just inherent in who orcs are.
It's like they go to different high schools, so they hate each other.
Exactly. And it's so they're just so nasty, and that's their undoing. They do all the fighting for Sam. Like imagine if Sam had to take on these guys on his own,
Yeah,
he'd be French toast.
absolutely. Sting really comes through here because the orcs can't even look at it without feeling fear.
Yeah,
I thought that was so cool, and I love that Bilbo sort of like is still a part of this story.
absolutely.
The fact that Sting is there and that Sam is the one who wields it.
Yeah. So he's surrounded by all this destruction, but he does hear someone running towards him, and he hears their footsteps echoing down the stairway overhead, and he has a moment of feeling like he needs to put the ring on. It says he was too weak and slow to restrain his hand. It dragged the chain and clinched the ring. So he's not putting it on, but he's sort of grasping it, and it sees it. The orc comes down. It says, leaping out of the dark opening at the right, it ran towards him. It was no more than 6 paces from him when, lifting its head, it saw him, and Sam could hear its gasping breath and see the glare in its bloodshot eyes. It stopped short, aghast. For what it saw was not a small, frightened hobbit trying to hold a steady sword. It saw a great silent shape, cloaked in a gray shadow, looming against the wavering light behind. In one hand it held a sword, the very light of which was a bitter pain, and the other was clutched at its breast, but held concealed some nameless menace of power and doom. So even though he isn't claiming the ring or even wearing it in this moment,
Yeah, it still seems to impart some power.
Sam plods on. The orc runs away from him because he seems to be this like elf warrior. And Sam kind of gloats. He goes, "Yes, the elf warrior is loose. I'm coming. Just you show me the way up, or I'll skin you." But the orc just runs away from him, and Sam plods on behind him.
I think we need to sort of fast forward to the place where the like confrontation happens between
Shagrat and Snaga.
Shagrat, Gorbag, and Snaga.
Yeah, so let's kind of break down the characters here. I almost had to like draw a diagram to like figure out what was going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got Shagrat and Snaga, who are on the same team.
Yes.
Okay, they're both from Mordor side.
Right.
And we got Gorbag, who is from the Minas Morgul side. So we should move on to the action between Shagrat, Snaga, and Gorbag. And this is so complicated. I'm sure we're gonna like screw this up.
Yeah.
But do you want to just like kind of break down what happens, the action here?
What I believe happens is the orc that, almost runs into Sam is Snagga. Snagga sees Sam and runs away back up to Shagrat. And Sam overhears Shagrat and Snagga arguing. The first thing that Shagrat says is, "You won't go again, you say. Curse you, Snagga, you little maggot. If you think I'm so damaged that it's safe to flout me, you're mistaken." Shagrat has given Snagga an order.
Go back down the stairs.
Yeah, go back down the stairs. I told you to go down the stairs. And he says, "I'm not going down the stairs. There's an alpha warrior down there." And, Shagrat continues to kind of threaten Snagga. And Snagga again says, "I'm not going down those stairs again." And Shagrat says, that's enough from you. I had my orders. It was Gorbag that started it, trying to pinch that pretty shirt." So Sam is right that they're fighting over the mithril shirt.
Yeah, Sam had kind of like speculated earlier that they must be arguing over his shirt. But Snagga is like really like contemptuous of Shagrat.
Yeah.
And he's like, basically like, you screwed this all up.
This is your fault. Yeah.
It's your fault because, you had two captains. You have Gorbag and Shagrat, and they're fighting over the swag, is what Snagga says. So Shagrat's like, that's enough from you. I had my orders. It was Gorbag started it, trying to pinch that pretty shirt. And Snagga's like, well, you put his back up being so high and mighty, and he had more sense than you anyway. He told you more than once that the most dangerous of these spies was still loose, and you wouldn't listen. So Shagrat is not taking this insolence. And he's like, essentially like Gorbag was in the fault. I was just trying to follow orders. But Snagga's like, there's a great fighter about one of those bloody-handed elves or one of the filthy Tarks. I looked it up, and Tark is like an orc word for Gondorian.
Gondorian, yeah.
He's coming here, I tell you. You heard the bell. So you're right about it ringing a physical bell. He's got past the watchers, and that's Tark work. He's on the stairs. Until he's off them, I'm not going down. Not if you were a Nazgul, I wouldn't. And then Shagrat's like, you'll do this, and you'll not do that. And when he does come, you'll bolt and leave me. No, you won't. I'll put red maggot holes in your belly first. And
Nasty.
Snagga runs away from Shagrat. And Sam is just kind of hiding, watching all this happen. It says, as far as Sam could see, Shagrat hunted Snagga around the roof until, ducking and eluding him, the smaller orc, with a yelp, darted back into the turret and disappeared. So Shagrat is like trying to murder Snagga.
Yeah.
And Snagga gets away.
Right.
And climbs back up, unseen by Sam anymore. And then as Shagrat comes in, Gorbag, who at this point we've not even seen, is like pretending to be dead among the other orcs.
Yeah, that's right.
And he does like a sneak attack on Shagrat, but Shagrat does this like orc move where he like dodges and then stabs Gorbag to death. And he says, "Got you, Gorbag." And then he licks his knife, puts it between his teeth, and gets the bundle and comes loping towards the door near Sam. So the bundle we know is,
the mithril shirt and Frodo's clothes. And
so Sam springs out to meet Shagrat with a shout. It says he was no longer holding the ring, but it was there, a hidden power, a cowing menace to the slaves of Mordor. And in his hand was Sting, and his light smote the eyes of the orc like the glitter of cruel stars in the terrible elf countries, the dream of which was a cold fear to all his kind. And Shagrat pushes the bundle into Sam's face, and Sam is startled by this and stunned, and Sam staggers back. Before he could recover, Shagrat darts past and down the stairs.
And so he runs away from Sam and goes and delivers that bundle to the mouth of Sauron, I guess.
It says, if Sam could have seen him and known the grief that his escape would bring, he might have quailed.
Yeah.
That means that, if Sam had known, like that bringing this, mithril coat and barrel blade and tattered rags and elven cloak would cause such pain to like Pippin and Gandalf and Aragorn and Legolas and getting the whole company, that it would have broken his heart. So Shagart gets away. I mean, that's such a complicated thing. I mean, this is an exchange that happens over like a page and a half. It probably took me like 3 times reading it to even feel like I understand exactly what's going on.
It's confusing.
But Sam continues to climb. And as he passes higher and higher through the tower, he just finds more and more dead bodies of orcs.
Then he finally comes to that dead end that we talked about where he starts to sing. And he's only briefly met with some hope that he maybe hears something in response to his song. But right away he's interrupted, and I guess this is Snagga.
It is Snagga. So I guess Snagga runs away from Shagrat trying to murder him, and he climbs back up into this like hidden room where Frodo is being held hostage. It's lit with a red lamp. You know, we've had this like image of like a red eye in the distance in the tower. It's because there's a red lamp that's burning in this hidden room that's concealed by a trapdoor that you need a ladder to get up and down with. So Sam sings, Frodo responds, Snagga whips him in response and tells him to be quiet. He says, "You lie quiet or you'll pay for it. You've got not long to live in peace, I guess. But if you don't want the fun to begin right now, keep your trap shut, see? There's a reminder for you." And there was a sound and crack of a whip. So hearing Frodo getting whipped enrages Sam, and it says that he climbs up the ladder to this trapdoor like a cat. And he has Sting in his hand, and as the orc wheels around, Sam slashes his whip hand from his arm. And even though he's like in terrible pain, he makes like a desperate charge towards Sam. And Sam swings again with Sting, but it goes wide, and he falls backwards, clutching at the orc. And then the orc stumbles over the ladder head and falls through the trapdoor and falls to his death. And now all we have left is Frodo and Sam in this pinnacle of this tower.
They finally get to embrace. Frodo, thinks it might be a dream.
Yeah.
Because from where he stands, the orc transformed into Sam.
Yeah, exactly.
He's just gotten whipped by this orc, and now Sam is there cradling him in his lap, basically. And Sam says, I love this, that Sam feels that he could sit like this in endless happiness, but that was not allowed.
It was not enough for him to find his master. He had still to try and save him. And he kisses Frodo's forehead. Oh, it's so tender and caring, and Frodo is so helpless. I love this line. I think I mentioned it earlier, but it says, Frodo lay back in Sam's gentle arms, closing his eyes like a child at rest when night fears are driven away by some loved voice or hand.
That's beautiful.
We get some descriptions of Frodo's torture. He talks about how he'd had some horrible burning drink poured down his throat. And he says, they stripped me of everything, and then 2 great brutes came and questioned me until I thought I would go mad, standing over me, gloating, fingering their knives. I'll never forget their claws and eyes. And then Sam responds, you won't if you talk about them, Mr. Frodo.
I put a big question mark next to that because it runs so counter to everything that we kind of know about trauma and
just bury it deep, Mr. Frodo.
Traumatic stress disorder. And if you just bury it down and don't talk about it, then it won't bother you. That's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. And it's old fashioned. It really shows that. Stiff upper lip, keep calm and carry on. Exactly. All of that. I mean, I guess that's how you win 2 world wars, right? But I think it's not good for it's not good for anybody. Don't take your mental health advice from Samwise Gamgee.
Son of Hamfast.
Son of Hamfast, cotton-headed, whatever. I mean, just yeah,
Ninny Hammer.
Ninny Hammer, right?
Frodo, up to this point, is completely naked. It's completely stripped of everything. And he assumes that the ring itself has been taken because Sam hasn't revealed yet that he has the ring. He says, "They've taken everything, Sam. Everything I had. Do you understand? Everything. The quest has failed, Sam. Even if we get out of here, we can't escape. Only elves can escape. Away out of Middle-earth, far away over the sea. If even that is wide enough to keep the shadow out."
Gosh, I missed that detail. Only elves can escape. That's worse in some way. Like the elves are going to leave us behind, and Sauron is going to dominate everything.
And then he says, if even that is wide enough to keep the shadow out.
Right. So maybe not.
Yeah.
Right.
Like maybe Sauron won't stop at Middle-earth. Maybe he'll go to Valinor as well. But Sam responds, "No, not everything, Mr. Frodo. And it hasn't failed. Not yet. I took it, Mr. Frodo, begging her pardon, and I've kept it safe. It's round my neck now, and a terrible burden it is, too." And it says, now it had come to it, Sam felt reluctant to give up the ring and burden his master with it again. I circled the word suppose, but I suppose you must take it back.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think there's a lot of weight in that suppose, and the fact that he's reluctant to give the ring back.
Right. There's a tension between the word suppose and his care for Frodo. But the word suppose makes us question his intent, right? It is burdening his master that enlargement of Sam's ego, as a sort of trick not to let go of the ring? Or is it that Sam has such purity of heart that he truly does not want to burden Frodo with it, and that's where the reluctance comes from? And I think it can be mixed, right?
Yeah.
But it's really psychologically
layered.
It's just psychologically layered and sophisticated, I think, in a way. And it's striking because it's so sophisticated compared to the idea that if you just don't talk about it, you don't have to think about it.
It's true.
It's really funny, but I love that moment. And this confrontation between them is so heartbreaking.
It's so Gollum-like, isn't it?
Yes, he snaps into that Gollum-like, the way that, we've talked about this before, but the way that addicts can treat each other and talk to people that they love, and how they're not themselves, that they're overtaken by this thing that has domination over them.
Yeah.
That they never even really had a chance to see their will to. And that's what's happening. It's happening to Frodo right now as much as it's happening to Sam. Yeah. And he immediately apologizes, right?
So he starts out with a compliment. He's like, "You're a marvel."
Yeah, right. That's interesting. Yeah.
And then quickly his tone changes and he says, "Give it to me." And he holds out a trembling hand. "Give it to me at once. You can't have it." And Sam says, "All right, Mr. Frodo. Here it is." And slowly he takes the ring out, takes the chain over his head, and he says, "But you're in the land of Mordor now, sir. And when you get out, you'll see the fiery mountain and all. You'll find the ring very dangerous now and very hard to bear. If it's too hard a job, I could share it with you, maybe." So, is that a genuine, just fully a care response, or is it a last kind of temptation of Master Samwise?
I think it's so hard to know. I think that however you answer is right.
Yeah. Frodo certainly takes it as a threat, and he says, "No, no." And he snatches the chain from Sam's hands, and he says, "No, you won't, you thief." Says, that Sam had changed before his eyes into an orc again, leering and pawing at his treasure, a foul little creature with greedy eyes and slobbering mouth. But now that the vision is past, he says, "Oh, Sam, what have I said? What have I done? Forgive me. After all you've done, it is the horrible power of the ring. I wish it had never been found. But don't mind me, Sam. I must carry the burden to the end. It can't be altered. You can't come between me and this doom." So Sam decides that he has to help him in another way.
Sam gets right into kind of problem solving mode, and he's like, "Well, you can't go about Mordor naked."
Yeah. You can't go out and not but your skin.
So he throws his elven cloak over Frodo's shoulders, and then he takes the chance of going and finding something for them both to wear, so that they can make their way through Mordor without being noticed, and so that they match, right? So that they both look like little orcs.
Sam does some like logistics around how much food they have and how much water they have. And
That's so Sam. It's great.
so Sam only has like one swallow of water basically left, and his Frodo's water skin has been slashed. Sam figures that they got like a couple weeks worth of Limbos and food from Faramir left that they can share. But Frodo's like, "Hey, great news! While you were down there like rooting around for rotten orc leather for me to wear, I found that they had not eaten the limbus in my bag because they didn't like it any more than Gollum did."
Yeah.
So they have enough food to get to Mount Doom is the short version of this, but they don't have enough water. Frodo insists that Sam drink the water, but Sam says, "We're going to have to figure out something quick or else we're, really out of luck."
It doesn't matter how much food they have if they don't have water.
Yeah. But here's something I think we should break down a little bit. Sam says, "Don't orcs eat and don't they drink? Or did they just live on foul air and poison?" And Frodo responds, "No, they eat and drink, Sam. The shadow that bred them can only mock, it cannot make. Not real new things of its own. I don't think it gave life to the orcs. It only ruined them and twisted them. And if they are to live at all, they have to live like other living creatures. Foul waters and foul meats they'll take if they can get no better, but not poison."
It occurred to me here, this line about the shadow and
Yeah.
the way that it, twisted these creatures.
Which is Morgoth.
Right. The shadow is Morgoth. But when I read the word shadow, even though it's referencing, what we've referred to as basically Satan. Well, what is a shadow?
Absence of light.
I mean, right, but where's the light? Like the light is the light God, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm.
this thing is, bent on the destruction of God
Mm-hmm.
in some way, the destruction of God's creation. But if the light is, if the shadow only exists because of the light,
Yeah.
then in some sense, the light and the shadow are not a dualist thing. They're like part of one
Yeah.
act of God's like being,
Mm-hmm.
And I just find some hope in this piece here, even though it's about this like terrible torture of these, elves that are enslaved to the will of Morgoth and Sauron and, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, just to quote Sam's song, "Above all shadows rides the sun."
Yeah. And so I don't know, it just, I don't know, reading this today and then reading it here with you tonight, it gives me some, I don't know, it gives me some comfort in an odd way.
I have to wonder though if Tolkien had lived a little bit longer. He lived to a good old age and he had a long time to like think through Lord of the Rings after he wrote it.
Yeah.
I wonder if he maybe didn't ultimately regret this line.
Yeah, I think probably.
Because it opens you up to like, okay, so if orcs were just twisted elves and men, like they're not made from like the dirt. They're not just like soulless automatons. Then does that mean that there's like forgiveness and redemption available to orcs? And if there's forgiveness and redemption available to them, and they're not just automatons that are like controlled, but they have personalities and they have ambitions and they are beings with souls, then can you just kill them without mercy, like Aragorn is going to do soon?
Yeah, I know. I don't know. It's problematic. I guess my mind, I'm probably just trying to avoid cognitive dissonance here, but my mind goes to, I mean, it would probably be wrong to call Tolkien a universalist, but it seems to me that if the song of creation was sung at the beginning of time and all things participated and participate in the song of creation, including, Morgoth with his descant or his counterpoint or whatever, right? That all of those things, including the orcs and whatever action happens between the orcs and Sauron and the forces of Gondor, are in the end redeemed by God, because God sang the whole song in the beginning. That all of this is, going toward an end, a telos, which in which all things are one.
Yeah.
And so, and I think it's very easy for me to sit here in my basement and say that, right? But I think that basically, that's basically my theology in the end, that all things belong, and these apparent divisions are essentially illusions, which in the fullness of time, through the arc of the cosmos, is redeemed by the total freedom of whatever we mean by divinity, holding all things together.
Yeah. Well said. So Sam and Frodo are in their thrifted orc gear. Sam has drank the last of their water, so that's top of their priority has to be to find water, and over the next couple chapters that'll be a big theme, is the ways that they get water. It says, at length they came to the door upon the outer court, and they halted. Even from where they stood, they felt the malice of the watchers beating on them, black silent shapes on either side of the gate through which the glare of Mordor dimly showed. And as they get closer to these watchers, Frodo loses strength and he sinks to the ground. He says, I can't go on, Sam. He says, I'm going to faint. I don't know what's come over me.
So Sam, who's already been through this, says, I know what's come over you, Mr. Frodo. Hold up now, it's the gate. There's some devilry here, but I've got through and I'm going to get out. It can't be more dangerous than before. Now for it. Sam drew out the elven glass of Galadriel again, as if to do honor to his hardihood and to grace with splendor his faithful brown hobbit hand that had done such deeds. The phial blazed forth suddenly, so that all the shadowy court was lit with a dazzling radiance like lightning, but it remained steady and did not pass.
Gilthoniel Elbereth, Sam cried. For why he did not know, his thought sprang back suddenly to the elves in the Shire and the song that drove away the Black Rider in the trees. Aya, Elenion Ankalima, cried Frodo once again behind him. That's the Elvish phrase that sprang from Frodo in Shelob's lair as well.
Yeah.
And it says, the will of the watchers was broken with a suddenness like the snapping of a cord, and Frodo and Sam stumbled forward. Then they ran through the gate and past the great-seated figures with their glittering eyes. There was a crack. The keystone of the arch crashed almost on their heads, and the wall above crumbled and fell in ruin. Only by a hair did they escape. A bell clanged, and from the watchers there went up a high and dreadful wail. Far up above in the darkness, it was answered. Out of the black sky, there came dropping like a bolt a winged shape, rending the clouds with a ghastly shriek.
We hope that you will join us next week for Book 6, Chapter 2 of Return of the King, The Land of Shadow.
We'll see you next week.
I thought it was probably pretty important to note here that as Sam is walking up the stairs, it says that his feet slap on the stones, on the stones like hands.
I could tell that you were about to make that joke just by how you breathed before you said it. I could hear the inflection of your breath change, and I knew you were about to bring up this long-standing joke.